guys, this is your Monday, the 25th of January SPAG lesson, and we're looking at brackets. So you should already know what we use brackets for, so if you do, please shout it at the screen now. And you would be right that we use it for extra information. Or we use it to short down big words like we did for NASA in our space. Obviously NASA stands for something which is quite a long and hard to read word, so we shorten it down to its acronym NASA. So it's giving me extra information. So we're going to have a look at this quiz today to see what you can remember, and then for you to create your own couple of words as well. So it's going to look like this. There's going to be three different sentences with brackets put in all different positions, and what I want you to do is pick if it's number 1, 2 or 3 and write down the correct sentence which you think the brackets are in correctly, and then on the next slide we'll see if you are correct where the tick is. So pause the video now, write down the words in which you think is correct, the sentence, and then we'll see. So if you wrote down the first sentence, you would be correct, and I'm going to explain why. So she knows that it was all her fault. So if I took that bracket out, that sentence would still make sense. She knows that it was all her fault, and if the brackets are in there, although she daren't come forward, that sentence is a subordinating clause. It does not make sense on its own. So that bracket gives me extra information about her not wanting to come forward. But the main part is that if I took that bracket out and just left what was left, she knows that it was all her fault still is a main clause that makes sense on its own. So let's have a look at the other two options. The middle option, she knows although she daren't come forward that it was all her fault. Well, we've got a subordinating clause. If we took out that bracket section, we don't have a sentence that makes sense on its own, so I can't use that one. She knows although she doesn't come forward does not make sense. So it would have to be a main clause with an added bracket, so it is not that one. And then our last one, she knows although that she didn't come forward that it was all her fault. So that one's a tricky one, because if I was to take those brackets out again, would it make sense? She knows although that it was all her fault. So that doesn't quite make sense. I need that although inside my bracket because it doesn't make sense when I take the brackets out of the sentence. So that is why it is the number 1, the first one. So that should be the one that you have written down. So have a tick of your answer or correct your answer to the one that is correct, and then let's see how you get on with the next ones. So here again we have 3 options, all about Isabel White, not Isabel Green. Have a look at these 3 options, pause the screen, have a read of them, and then write down the one that you think is correct with the brackets in the right place. If you wrote this one, the middle one, you are correct. So I'm going to tell you why. Let's go for this one that is correct first. Isabel White, not Isabel Green, injured her knee in PE today. So if I was to take those brackets out again, I would have Isabel injured her knee in PE today, which is a main clause and makes sense on its own. So the Isabel White, not Isabel Green section in our brackets does not make sense on its own, and it gives me extra information. I know some of you may have put the bottom sentence. Isabel White, brackets, not Isabel Green, injured her knee in PE today. Well, if it's already given me Isabel White, her second name, in the main clause, I do not need to know the extra information that it's not Isabel Green, because it already says Isabel White, so I don't need that one. So that might have tripped us up a little bit, whereas if it's just the name Isabel, then I do need to know what her second name is. So that's why it's the middle one. And then again, Isabel White, in brackets, not Isabel Green, injured her knee in PE today. So again, it could have been that one, but I need all of my section of Isabels in my brackets for it to make sense. Okay, hopefully you've got that one right. If you have, give it a big tick. If not, then write it out for me. Okay, next one. Again, have a read of them all. See which one you think is correct. Write down the correct sentence for me. So the middle one is the one that you should have wrote down. although she says she's not a bully, and we all know she is, she tripped up another girl on the playground. So that's the one that we need. And we all know she is our subordinating extra information clause. It does not make sense on its own. And if I took it out of the sentence, I would have, although she says she's not a bully, she tripped up another girl on the playground, which still makes sense, and it gives me all the information I need. So the middle one is the one you should have had. The first one doesn't really make sense because without the extra information in the brackets, it's not a main clause. Although she says she's not a bully, and we all know she is, I need some extra information, so that doesn't make sense. And then the third one, although she says she's not a bully, and we all know she is, if I was to take that bracket out, it would read, although she says she's not a bully, and she tripped, it just doesn't make sense with that and in there. So I need the and to be inside the brackets. So again, tick it if you've got it right, if not, write it out for me. Next one, have a read, which one is correct, which bracket is in the correct place. Write it down for me. So you should have written down the third sentence, which talks about the smallest of the puppies, the one they call Toby, bounded over to fetch his ball. So the extra information is his name, which is Toby. So if I was to take that bracket out, it would read, the smallest of the puppies bounded over to fetch his ball. So that's still a main clause, it still makes sense, and my extra information is about Toby. If you put the first one, it doesn't quite make sense. The smallest of the puppies, the one bounded over. So if I took that bracket out, the one bounded over to fetch his ball just doesn't make sense. I need the one to be into brackets. And then here in the middle section, we've got the smallest of the puppies, the one they call Toby, bounded over. It does make sense to fetch his ball. If I could just stop at bounded over, it does make sense. But the extra information there is not that he's gone to get his ball, that's more of the main clause. The extra information is the one that they call Toby. Okay, so you should have ticked that third one, you should have wrote that down. Again, if not, tick it for me now, write it down and correct your answers. So here again, have a look through which ones is correct, write it down for me. And you should have ticked or wrote down the third sentence. They, I mean ogres, were fed up on their damp, mossy cave. Perfect. So if I was taking out that bracket, it would still make sense as a main clause. They were fed up on their damp, mossy caves. And obviously I need extra information to tell me who they is referring to. What is that pronoun referring to? So they, I mean the ogres. Let's look at the second one, so the middle option. They, I mean, were fed up. So if I took that bracket out, it wouldn't make sense. And again, if I took the bracket out at the top one, they, I mean ogres, were fed up. It's a main clause, I mean it makes sense, but we don't usually have of their damp mossy caves in the brackets because I still don't know what they're fed up about. That's not my extra information. So we need that bottom one. And then this one again, have a read through, look at where the brackets are, see which one is correct. You should have ticked the middle one. She brought her sister, who she normally doesn't like, also a relative clause in there, because that's my extra information, because I could replace those brackets for commas, and I would have a relative clause. Some fudge back from the seaside. So again, if I took that bracket out of there, I would have, she brought her sister some fudge back from the seaside, which is a main clause, it makes sense on its own, and my extra information is telling me that she doesn't usually like her. That top one, if you wrote that one, she brought her sister who some fudge. If I took that bracket out, who some fudge doesn't quite make sense, does it? So I need to make sure that if I took that bracket out, it would still read perfectly. And then my bottom one, she brought her sister who she doesn't normally like some fudge. Again, is a main clause with a relative clause in there. She brought her sister who she doesn't normally like some fudge. It makes sense, but my extra information is that the bit that she doesn't usually like. It makes more sense for that to be my extra information, more so than back from the seaside. So it would work, but it's not the correct English form of brackets. So hopefully you've got them all right. If not, then you've checked your answers and you've corrected the ones. So hopefully you can mark them and you can send us in your marks from Dojo. And what I need you to do now is have a go at writing maybe 4 or 5 different sentences that contain some brackets within it. So you could tell me an extra information about when you go to the park, So on Fridays, comma, I go to the park, and then in brackets, with Mary, Kate and Ashley, close brackets, and we love eating ice cream. So if I put that in there, that would make sense. So you can have a go. Obviously that was just off the top of my head, but you have a real good think about how you can put brackets into your sentences. Can't wait to have a picture of them, send them into Dojo for us to have a look at. Good job.